Welcome to the Cornfield Sports Pod Reaction Show. My name is Matt, as always. With me today, I have Believe in Iowa State host Cody Van Salalem, the Matt Campbell impersonator.
Great introduction. Thank you. Yeah. Just first off, just want to say I'm just grateful to be able to show up here and check out this college football playoff bracket.
Yes, speaking of the college football playoff bracket, released today. Um, First off, the first four buys here, I don't think anybody was particularly surprised at who they were based on who won the conference championship games yesterday. Oregon in that top spot, Georgia number two, um, Boise State at number three, and Arizona State at four. I think there was some debate to be had between who should have been the three and the four, though, and that's where I want to start. So, what are your thoughts on this, Cody?
I mean, like the committee said, they kind of like once they set that final CFP ranking prior to conference championship week, there wouldn't have been like too much change. And just where Arizona State and Boise State were, I think that wouldn't have changed too much. Me personally, if I was on the committee, I wouldn't have had like Boise State up as high, up higher than Arizona State or whoever came out of the Big 12. But I can understand where they're coming from, and I can respect it. But I mean, this is kind of like it'd be a good thing for just college football as a whole. Seeing Boise State in a prominent position, it can inspire the G5 champion to really play well and play higher quality teams. And I mean, it's I'm pretty satisfied with that. I mean, the way this came out, this is kind of what I expected, so I'm not too surprised and I'm not too mad about it.
The fact that Boise State is at number three, I don't want to hear any G5 teams ever complain that the committee is biased against them again. Because I actually think that Arizona State should have been the three seed and that Boise State should have been the four seed. I have no qualms with Clemson being the last team in as the worst conference champion because they won it in an upset and they had three losses in the regular season. I don't think there's really any controversy there. But
Yeah.
that said, Arizona State, yes, they have two losses. They also have a significantly better resume than Boise State does. Boise State has nothing of quality on their resume. Aside from the fact that they won their games, and I credit to them, if you win your games, you should be rewarded for that. But their biggest highlight on their resume is a loss to Oregon.
Hmm.
They're riding a loss as their highest quality, piece of evidence over the course of the entire season. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound like a three seed to me. That sounds like UMass.
Hmm. And speaking on that Oregon loss, I think we've talked about this before. This is when Oregon wasn't looking like the dominant team that they are like now later in the season because prior to that Boise State game,
Right, Oregon
they
had
had
almost
struggled
lost to
against
Idaho
Idaho.
in the previous game. Yes. Um, but I don't think that if your statement accomplishment over the season is almost beating somebody, I don't think your team is actually as good as you portray yourselves to be. And
Mm.
that's a huge knocking point for Boise State. That one really hurts them. Whereas Arizona State right now holds wins over BYU, and they hold a win over Iowa State, who they absolutely bludgeoned. They bludgeoned us yesterday.
Yeah.
Um, and Cam Scattaboo looked kind of like Derrick Henry yesterday.
Yeah, Cam Scatterbu had 16 carries for 170 yards and two touchdowns, but he broke off a lot of those, like a
Averaging
lot of
over 10
runs.
yards a carry.
Yeah, and nobody could bring him to the ground. No one could bring Cam Scatterbu to the ground, no matter who you threw at him, whether it be a linebacker or secondary or D lineman. It was tough to get that dude down.
Dude was harder to grab than a greased watermelon in a lake at summer camp.
Hmm. I mean it. Yeah, and I mean, I guess just the way they were playing, I think just Cam Scatterbu. Like this is the thing that people were talking about when it came to the matchup, like how would Iowa State's run defense match up against Cam Scatterbo, and I mean they got gashed.
We
This
told
was
you that that was going to be a bad matchup. Iowa State, in order to win this game, was going to have to force Arizona State to pass. They did not do
right.
that. They let Arizona State run all over them and open up the pass. So when Arizona
Hmm.
State did pass it, they were successful.
Yeah.
And if they had been
Eh,
less successful in the run, they probably wouldn't have been as successful in the pass game.
Yeah, and you mentioned the pass game being opened up. I think the one play I'm thinking of like at the moment that was huge for Arizona State's momentum was that fourth and like two, where they converted on a 63-yard pass to ultimately set up a touchdown. But I think that was just the fact that like I think Bo Freeler like was the high safety, and my guess is yeah that play was not well read, but I think maybe in the back of Bo Freeler's like head he knows about like the way that Cam Scadaboo was running is like oh I gotta stop Cam Scadaboo from really gashing, and then by then he was just caught in no man's land, and then Sam Levitt had a wide open receiver that took it down all the way inside the Iowa State 5. So that just showed just the impact that Cam Scadaboo had on the game.
Yeah. And you got to give some credit to the Big 12 Coach of the Year here, Kenny
Hmm.
Dillingham. The guy had Iowa State read like a book and played us from the second drive, from our second drive through the remainder of the game. We had a good first drive. We had a good second drive until the very end of it, and we got stopped and held to a field goal. After that, everything fell apart for us, and everything went right for Arizona State.
Yeah, I mean,
And
uh,
it's not like Iowa State is a bad team, but man, did we get thrashed by Arizona State, and they proved that they are a contender. So
yeah, absolutely.
I gotta give some respect to Arizona State after the way that they just beat us because they earned it. They
Yeah,
earned that
yeah,
respect all over the place. Defense, offense, ground through the air, special teams, whatever. They
yeah.
made Iowa State. They made every player on the field for Iowa State's life a living hell for 3 hours.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned Kenny Dillingham winning Big 12 Coach of the Year. I mean, like he does remind me like he does remind me quite a bit like Matt Campbell with the way that he kind of handles himself, especially in press conferences. And I mean, it was noted that he had spent some time in Ames studying Matt Campbell, so he's very like him and Matt Campbell are very similar coaches. So just seeing like how like Arizona State has like really conducted themselves like through the year with the way that Kenny Dillingham has his roster really put together.
And what do you know? They've
They
both
look.
turned around programs that have recently been insanely crappy and are colored dark red and gold.
Hmm.
A lot of odd
And
similarities.
hmm I mean, yeah, Arizona State, like that was just like it was very fun to see how they just rose up like this year from being picked in the preseason poll for the Big 12 dead
Dead
last, and
last.
now they're the champions. Now they're the number one team in the Big 12. They're in the college football playoffs, so that just goes
Champions, and they're no doubter champion too,
yeah.
because the only other team in the Big 12 that has two losses right now is BYU, and Arizona State holds a head to head. So there's nothing to dispute.
All right.
Arizona State clearly proved they are the best team in the Big 12, and they are the way they played yesterday. I don't care which team you are in the remainder of the college football playoff field. I don't want to play Arizona State right now because they
Yeah.
are at the peak of their game.
Yeah. And the way that in their game plan, it's sustainable. Like you don't rely on necessarily big explosive plays. They can just and gas you like in the ground game.
Yeah,
I like the way they play football.
they are all kinds of dangerous. Let's move on to the remainder of the seeding here.
Mm.
At five, Texas, six, Penn State, seven, Notre Dame. I'm kind of interested to see what you think about the placement of these teams here, because in the
Yeah.
previous CFP rankings, Notre Dame, I believe, was the four team.
Yeah.
They were behind Penn State and Texas, so that carries. They didn't play in a conference championship game.
Hmm. With Notre Dame, just seeing I know the one thing that I kind of did hold against Notre Dame for a while was that bad loss to Northern Illinois at home, but to their credit, they rattled off 10 straight wins. They've mostly done it in dominant fashion. So, just seeing them here, I'm not surprised. Like, they did get bumped down a little bit, but I think that's more of a case of I think other teams I would say jumping them or things like that when it came to seeding. Obviously, with Boise State winning, being the 3 seed, and then Arizona State the 4. I think that was just more of a case of teams usurping Notre Dame because again, Notre Dame didn't play a game this past weekend, so I think it's just teams just jumping up, and obviously you had kind of that.
Right,
Um,
all four of the buys, or sorry, not all four of the buys. 3 out of the 4 buys jumped Notre Dame because Notre Dame can't win a conference championship as an independent. Georgia was
mhm.
ranked behind them. Georgia was ranked 5th. Boise State was ranked 10th, I believe, 10th or 11th last week,
Yeah, they were 10th.
and Arizona State was 15th.
Yep.
So all of those teams have jumped Notre Dame by winning their conference championships,
Mhm.
which automatically shoved Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame backward 3 spots. Aside from
Mhm.
that, Texas and Penn State were not punished at all for losing their conference championship games. They were not punished for playing the extra game. And I
Mhm.
got to give the committee credit for that because that is the way that it should be.
Yeah. I mean, it's the fact that you're playing an extra week. Like you obviously are playing for a
Against the
bye.
best
Yeah.
opponent in your conference, nonetheless. I think that you
Hmm.
should be rewarded for winning that game, but not
Yeah.
punished for losing it.
Yep.
Now,
And making the
the
conference
committee
championship.
did not follow the same trend when they ranked our 11th team, Southern Methodist, because Southern
Mm.
Methodist started ranked. They were, let me try to remember this correctly, 6th, or was that
I
Ohio
think they were.
State?
But that was Ohio State. That was Ohio State at 6. It was
So
Ohio State at 6.
SMU was 8, weren't they?
Yeah, SMU
SMU was
was
8. Who
8.
was 7?
7th. Let me see. I think my best guess would have to be Indiana, unless
No,
I'm.
Indiana was 10. Looking at the
I was
field
assuming
here,
Big
who are we
16.
missing?
Yeah.
7. Oh, Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, which we'll talk about Tennessee here in a minute.
Hmm.
They've got a really tough path. But SMU, with their loss, gets dropped all the way to 11. Um,
Hmm.
so they, unlike Texas and Penn State, they did get punished for losing their game. And the big debate earlier today, as they were being announced, was, who's getting in? Is it going to be SMU or is it going to be Alabama?
Hmm.
Now, I think that they picked this right. What are you thinking though?
Yeah, I'd say yeah they got it correct. I mean, you can't punish SMU that much for again. Granted, they did get dropped a couple spots, but you can't leave them, omit them, or an Alabama squad that lost 3 games and they were all in conference, so you can't use the non-con excuse I was seeing some Alabama fans were trying to use. They lost all their games in conference, and 2 of those losses were to teams that went 500. You're talking about a 6-6 Vanderbilt team, a 6-6 Oklahoma squad,
That not
and that
only beat
Oklahoma
them,
law.
but kept them from scoring a touchdown.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe couldn't do anything against that Oklahoma squad,
Yeah,
and Oklahoma almost lost to Houston.
here's the thing though is because Alabama did not play in a conference championship game, I think you have to evaluate Alabama versus SMU on regular season results alone. I think
Hmm.
that you have to some extent dismiss the results of the ACC championship because you
Hmm.
shouldn't punish SMU for playing the extra game. Otherwise, it devalues playing in that title game, and SMU's better off not playing at all. And if you start going down that road, and you punish teams for playing in their conference championship game, and then you throw them out of the college football playoff because they lose when otherwise they would have been in. That's when you start looking at teams opting out of their conference championship game entirely. If SMU had been thrown out of the playoff in favor of Alabama, that definitely sets the precedent where SMU can go, okay, next time I just won't play in the title game.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely devalues conference championships.
Right.
But the other thing, too, is SMU's only loss on the year is not a particularly damaging loss. It's to a ranked BYU team. Aside from that, SMU took care of business.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about SMU. Their schedule for. Let's take a look here. Yeah, they only lost by 3, hosting BYU, but everything else they took care of business. And that ACC championship game that came down to a walk off field goal. So up until like
In
that
overtime.
last kick, yeah, was it in overtime? I
I
thought it
believe it
was
was in
no.
overtime.
No, it was no, it
Was
was
it
in
at the end of the fourth
regulation.
quarter?
No,
Was it last
it was
second?
the end of the yeah, it was the last
Okay. The
consecutive
last
quarter.
time I looked at the score for that game before it ended, it was tied in the fourth quarter with like no time left. So
Yeah.
I had assumed it was
Yeah,
going overtime.
Clemson's Nolan Hauser kicked a 56-yard field goal and basically walked off SMU to win the ACC championship game. So that was a regulation walk off.
So then here's a further question. I don't know what the writing of it implies within the rules of the college football playoff with conference champions. Does the fifth conference champion have to be the 12 seed, or
Uh,
can they be anywhere between 5 and 12?
I think the 12 was generally like originally set to be like that G5 champion, but because of how Boise State was
Because the
how
rule
Boise
because
State
the rule as I
performed.
understand it is that the top five conference champions automatically get into the playoff, and the top four get the bye. But I don't remember
Yeah,
there being any language about the fifth conference champion automatically being the 12 seed. Like
yeah, I didn't.
why can't they be ranked higher? Because Clemson did beat SMU. So they have the head to
Right.
head. They're obviously
Yeah,
comparable teams because they're right next to each other in the rankings.
yeah,
So either the committee is saying that there's a very large gap between 11 and 12. They're favoring the fact that SMU still only lost once in the regular season, which I think is a fair argument to make.
yep.
Or they just don't really care that much about the head to head.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, this. Yeah, I'm not sure, but like, I never saw that specific thing. It was just
Because I
weird.
find it a little bit bizarre that Clemson is seated behind SMU. But if that is in the rules of the college football playoff seeding, then I guess it makes sense.
Okay. Okay. So I think this. Okay. So it says here that um, the 4 highest ranked conference champions will be seeded 1 through 4, given a first round bye. Fifth highest ranked conference champion will receive the final automatic bid. I think it did say that if the fifth conference champion was not included in the top 12 of the CFP, top 25, it will be slotted as the number 12 seed. If I'm not mistaken,
So
yeah,
is the
if I'm not
CFP saying
mistaken,
that they're not in the top 12 and therefore they get the 12 spot? What were the listed
um,
rankings?
it says Clemson was at 16. Yeah, Clemson's at 16.
Oh, okay. So there's a massive gap then.
Yeah, because so that's the main sentence that you're looking for. If they weren't ranked inside the top 12, then they
So
automatically
they've
get
got
the.
Clemson still behind the three SEC schools with 3 losses,
Yep.
which I suppose makes sense if they're saying that Clemson and South Carolina are comparable and South Carolina has head to head. Then South
Mhm.
Carolina's got to be ahead of them, and because Alabama and Ole Miss both have head to head against South Carolina as comparable teams, they both
Yep.
got to be ahead of South Carolina as well. So that's kind of how you
Mhm.
were right. You flip Alabama and Ole Miss however you want to in that order.
Mhm.
Um, Then you got South Carolina, Clemson. That makes sense.
Mm.
Let's talk about a couple other ones here. We got three more teams to get into here. Um, or actually, I should say we got three more teams because we already talked about Notre Dame. Um, but I want to break this down in individual games. Let's go back to Notre Dame for a second. Playing Indiana in South Bend.
Mhm.
That is an in-state game.
Yep.
I would imagine there's going to be a lot of Hoosiers fans in northern Indiana at that stadium. It's going to be a Notre Dame friendly crowd for sure because of all their, Notre Dame's got a huge fan base. They turn out for games, and they're
Mhm.
gonna sell tickets like a home game because it is a home game. It's not a neutral.
Right.
It's not supposed to be neutral. Um, but I imagine Indiana will travel well to this one because they don't have to travel particularly far. And man, is that putting the two Indiana schools against each other? That's a sweet, sweet narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this one. I don't think I'm not too familiar like with Indiana Notre Dame, but I mean, you're talking about two teams who basically
I
caught
mean,
fire in different ways.
right, we're not talking about an extended rivalry either, like Indiana and Purdue have. Notre Dame and
Mhm.
Indiana don't play each other all that often,
Right.
so um, this creates an interesting, in-state matchup opportunity for teams that they have that geographic tension without actually being rivals. But maybe it's the kind of thing that can spark a rivalry here in the future if they meet up multiple times. If this is kind of the origin of that. Um, and then of course the winner of that will have Georgia. So good
Mhm.
luck to whoever wins that game. You better hope Carson Beck is having a bad day and not a good day. The other two
Mhm.
teams that we have yet to talk about will be playing in Columbus at the Horseshoe, Ohio State, and Tennessee. And this has got to be, in my opinion, the single most exciting matchup of the first round.
Yeah. I am really curious about like this matchup, especially being it in the shoe. Just I guess you would have like to match up Ohio State's defense, which like I might like think about it like it might still be one of the better defensive units in the country. I feel like when I think Ohio State, they always have like a
They
very
effectively
very
shut down Indiana,
mm-hmm.
something nobody else did.
Right. And then you've got the firepower of Tennessee's offense with
Well, this
Dylan
this ten,
Sampson.
this Tennessee team isn't built on offense, though. They're built on slugging it out in defense, and defense travels. And I think that's part of what
Mhm.
makes this such a compelling matchup.
Right.
Tennessee is built more like one of these cold weather Big Ten teams. They look more like an Ohio State or a Penn State this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if Ohio State is really prepared for that because when they're playing SEC teams in past years, it's been Georgia or Alabama. That's
Right.
pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think Ohio State might have some preconceived notions that they're going to be trying to get over during the next couple weeks here while they're preparing for this game. But that's different than preparing to play against Penn State when it should be the same.
Right.
So I think that makes this a very compelling matchup. I think this is going to be an insanely close matchup. The spread is favoring Ohio State right now by like 7 points or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's crazy. I think this game should be a pick 'em. So
Yeah.
if
They
I
have
was gonna if I was gonna bet spread, I'd be betting Tennessee on this.
yeah. They currently have the spread. This is on FanDuel. They have Ohio State minus 7.5.
Yeah, I would bet Tennessee spread. I wouldn't touch the money line with a 10-foot pole on this game. I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
clue who's gonna win it.
Yeah.
But regardless of whoever wins it, they get a date with Oregon, so that's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be less than pleasant.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you're Ohio State, I mean, you've already tasted defeat at the hands of Oregon, when you visited the Autzen Zoo earlier in the year. You know what it's like to get beaten by them.
yeah. So whoever ends up winning this game here between Tennessee and Ohio State. Tennessee and Ohio State got tough draws. Um, because they got to deal with each other first. That's no
Right.
that's no easy feat. And you got to deal with Oregon. And if by some miracle you manage to beat Oregon, then you're getting a date most likely with Texas. I think Texas is
Hmm.
going to be favored to make that semifinal.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy game to play either. Or if Arizona State gets there, now you've got an Arizona State team that, after their last two games, looks way scarier than anybody thought. Or I should say, after
Hmm.
their last three games, because they beat BYU here. Or no, it's last four. That was a couple weeks ago that they beat BYU. That wasn't the week before the title game. Um,
Yeah.
Either
That.
way,
Yeah.
as the longer that time goes on, as Arizona State keeps winning, the scarier they look. So if Arizona State makes it to the semifinal, whoever plays them is not going to be thrilled about that.
Yeah. Yeah. You might catch Arizona State just as they're continuing to be really hot. You're catching Arizona State at the wrong time.
If you're
You have to match
Tennessee,
this.
if you're Tennessee right now, and you find a way to actually make it to the Natty and win, you better be getting four trophies for this. They're going to have to come up with a trophy for this round one game, because
Hmm.
Ohio State at 10-2, they might be the best 10-2 team. They very well might be the best 10-2 team.
Hmm.
Um, and another thing that I think is an interesting comparable here, um, is Penn State. Penn State is a team that Ohio State beat, but they only had one loss in the regular season, made it to the Big Ten championship game, and they got rewarded for that. Penn State, I think, got precisely the opposite level of a draw here. If you're Penn State, you're happy right now,
Hmm.
because you're about to get an SMU team that looks weaker than they did before. They finally lost in a playoff game, which will probably be a whiteout game in Happy Valley.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah, this is going to be a whiteout game. This playoff game will be a whiteout.
This will probably be the most electric atmosphere Happy Valley has ever had. That place is
Yeah.
going to be absolutely rocking. And
Hmm.
SMU has not played in an environment like that.
Yeah.
They
SMU,
can't
I'm
prepare for
looking
that
here.
in Dallas,
Yeah. I'm looking at it right now.
not in
Yeah,
their
I'm
stadium.
reading yeah. I'm reading the reactions that like people saying like that Penn State is going with the whiteout. A lot of them are saying that SMU is going to get changed. They're expecting a massacre of the SMU Mustangs by Penn State. That's what I'm looking at right now.
Honestly, I
This is
it doesn't matter what team you are in this playoff. I would be scared to play Penn State in Happy Valley.
mm,
Penn State at home is very dangerous. I would
yeah.
not want to go there. And whoever wins this game, Penn State, will get Boise State, which is probably the best draw of the four teams in the bye.
Yeah.
I don't trust Boise State as much as I trust Arizona State after last week.
Hmm.
Because the best wins on Boise State's schedule is beating UNLV twice, and they didn't look that great doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. They only yeah, this was a home game for you for Boise State and they only won by like 14. Like they won by 14. Now, granted, Ashton Genty ran for 209 yards and a touchdown, but I felt like
He's
there
not
was a
going to be able
time
to do
where
that against Penn State.
yeah, the defense that Penn State has is way different than any defense that Boise State has seen.
The closest would be Oregon.
Yeah, outside of
And Genty
Oregon.
did still carve up Oregon, but
Yeah.
I think Penn State is better on run defense. I think their pass defense
Mhm.
might not be as good as Oregon's,
Mhm.
but their run defense I do think is better.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like Penn State, like they might be able to, like their defensive line might be able to control that line of
Penn
scrimmage.
State is one of the few teams that I think might be built to slow Genty down.
Mhm.
And the other team that comes to mind is Texas. And that's completely on the opposite side of the bracket. So that's not something that Genty needs to be concerned about right now. But
Right.
Penn State, I think that that's two very favorable matchups for Penn State. And I think they have a pretty clear shot to the semifinal where they either get Indiana, who lost their only big game of the year to Ohio State pretty spectacularly. They get Notre Dame, who won their biggest game, which was against Texas A&M, who's like a four-loss team right now. Um, not a lot of show for Notre Dame aside from just winning the games that they have. I think Army is probably Texas or not Texas Notre Dame's best win,
Hmm.
and then you've got Georgia, who is definitely more of a proven commodity. They've beat Texas twice. They they beat Tennessee. You can't look at that and slouch. Um, but Carson Beck has one good arm right now.
Hmm.
Dude came
Yeah.
in the last play of the game and handed the ball off with one arm while the other one was hanging limp.
Oh. Mm.
So I don't know how much we want to trust Stockton here. Stockton was not able to muster a whole lot against Texas, but Texas also has a very solid defense. Texas has
Hmm.
one of the best defensive lines in the country, and I think you can make a fair argument that they have the best defensive line in the country. Texas is really good in the trenches. Um,
Yeah.
but I think Penn State has a very good shot at the semifinal right now. Um, I think more than likely, whichever of the three teams that they draw when they get there, if Carson Beck isn't back and healthy, if they haven't found a way to fix him, I think that that's kind of the only situation. Is that I think a healthy Carson Beck led Georgia is probably the only situation where Penn State is not favored in that game. I think Penn State is favored against a Stockton led Georgia. I think that Penn State is favored against Notre Dame or Indiana, regardless.
Yeah.
So I think Penn State has a fantastic path to get to the
Hmm.
semifinal. And I think that regardless of who they play, unless it ends up being Carson Beck finds a way to get healthy and play in that game, if they play injured Georgia or any of the other two teams, I think Penn State's got a really good shot to make it to the national
Hmm.
title game. And then
Yeah.
they've got to deal with the likes of either Oregon or Texas or Ohio State or Tennessee.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think for Penn
That other
State,
side, that
one
left side
player.
of the bracket is stacked.
Mhm. Yeah, one player I want to look out for if you're like looking at Penn State, Tyler Ward, and he does base just about anything you ask out of him. I mean, that dude is literally a Swiss Army knife. That dude, I saw the dude like throughout the year. He's ran the football, he's caught the football, he's even tried passing the football a few times. So that's going to be the big player I think for Penn State,
Dude
and
should
he's
be
going to
the
contribute a
Hornung
lot.
Award winner.
Hmm. Yeah, if there's anyone I would give that award to, it's easily Tyler Ward.
All right. Um. So then that leaves us with who's your favorite to win this whole darn thing?
It's tough. Like there were quite a few teams I can really make a case for. The teams I could really make a case for Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State. I think this might be I'm leaning right now. Oregon finally gets that national championship. I think Dan Lanning and what he's got going on in Eugene. I think that that team can truly win the national championship.
Oregon did prove finally against Ohio State that they can win big games when it counts, and then they did it again against Penn State in the Big Ten championship.
Hmm. And also
This is
that
a team
proved
that
like
can
that.
contend,
Yeah.
but
And then again,
that scare against Idaho early in the season still concerns me because it's not like
mhm,
they were waiting on guys that were injured in the offseason to come back. That was the team pretty much as it is.
mhm.
So maybe if you dig into the film enough, you can find a flaw in that game that Oregon hasn't yet fixed.
Yeah. Yeah, you could potentially that week one
And if there's any
scare against
team,
Idaho.
if there's any team who's got a coach that worries me that they might be able to do that, it's Texas. Sarkisian is the coach that can find that flaw. I
Mhm.
don't know if there's any other coaches uh, in this system right now, at least on that half of the bracket, that can do that. I think if you go to the other half of the bracket, I'm looking at Georgia here. Kirby Smart might be that guy too.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at the this left half of the bracket here, is Josh Heupel that guy? I don't think so. Is Ryan Day that guy? No. Uh, is Dabo that guy? I don't think so. I think Dabo's fallen back a step. And is Kenny Dillingham that guy? Maybe 5, 10 years in the future he is, but not yet.
Yeah. And then
Um,
obviously you mentioned the Big Ten title, Penn State, James Franklin. He has not proven to win big games. I believe like I was watching a video talking about the Big Ten championship or talking about Penn State as a whole. James Franklin is 1-14 against top five opponents during his time at Penn State.
that is true, but the situation that he has found himself in, at least until the semifinal point, is favorable because Boise State is not a top five team. They got the bye because of their conference championship. And
Right.
SMU obviously is not a top five team. They're the 11 seed.
Mhm. And they're also hosting that game,
Right.
so that home crowd
So the
should give
first chance
extra
that
juice.
Penn State has to play a team that is truly top five is going to be in that semifinal. And I think that either Georgia's definitely top five. They were the fifth ranked team last week, and then they won their SEC title game. Do you have the list rankings pulled up here? I want to see where Notre Dame fell.
Let me see. CFP. Okay. So they have Notre Dame like at number five. So they have them number five.
They do. Okay, so Notre Dame also would be a top five team. I still think Penn State is favored against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think I would take Penn State over Notre Dame. Like match between James Franklin and Marcus Freeman. I think I would trust James Franklin 55% of the time versus 45 with Marcus Freeman.
If I was going to be betting on that game, I would take the Penn State money line on a neutral
Hmm.
site, and that game would be on a neutral site. There's no reseeding in this, so I really like Penn State's draw. I think Penn State probably gets to the national championship because I'm operating under the assumption that Carson Beck will not be back
Yeah.
for the remainder of
And
the
I think
season. The way
the
that
way
injury
his
looked,
injury, yeah, because it
his
was
arm
like,
was
wasn't it like,
dangling limp.
hmm so that takes some time to recover. And I
So
don't
I
know if how many weeks, like 3 weeks or so,
yeah.
would be enough.
So I think Penn State. If I'm betting on a team from the right half of this bracket here to make it to the national title game, I think Penn State gets in. But
Hmm.
I don't think they win it. I think the left side of the bracket is way more stacked than the right
Yeah.
side of the bracket here. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm looking at this left half of the bracket, and I'm not sure how many teams that I think would be that Penn State would be favored against. Um, Oregon, they certainly would not be after Oregon beat them handily in Indianapolis.
Hmm.
Um, Ohio State, they would not be. Ohio State already beat them once.
Hmm.
Texas, that game's going to be a bruiser of a game, but I got to give it to Texas. They just have more
Yeah.
weapons.
Yeah. I give that game to Texas.
Texas is loaded with weapons.
Hmm. Let's see what else. Well,
Clemson,
Clemson.
Clemson, obviously not. Clemson's not going to make it very far.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, I think I would favor against Penn State. Tennessee's got more weapons too.
Mm-hmm. And finally, how about Arizona State?
Arizona State is kind of the joker in the deck. I don't know what they're going to do. If they come out firing on all cylinders like they did in the Big 12 championship, they're as dangerous a team as any.
Mm-hmm.
But are they going to be playing that rock solid? Or are we going to see some more regression to the mean? And if we're operating under that assumption, which is probably the more likely thing to happen, is that they regress to the mean, I don't think Arizona State makes it there. So if I'm having to guess from the left side of that bracket, I'm thinking it's probably going to be either Oregon or Texas.
Yeah.
And in that matchup, Georgia has been able to find flaws in Texas's defense. Oregon has more weapons than Georgia does on offense.
Yeah. And plus, I think, Dylan Gabriel is a better QB than Carson Beck.
Yes, Dylan Gabriel is definitely a better QB than Carson Beck. But their receiving core, Georgia does not have as many weapons as Oregon's receiving core does. Georgia's got a better running back in ETN. But I think that overall, Oregon's offense is just a league different than Georgia's is. Georgia's defense, I think, is slightly better. So I think that game just ends up being more high scoring in general if we see an Oregon-Texas matchup. But Texas has a lot of offensive weapons, and I don't know if Oregon's defense can keep up.
Yeah.
I think that game ends up being a shootout. But because Texas's defense is stronger than Oregon's, I think Texas ends up winning that game. So my final, I've got Texas and Penn State. And in that matchup, those two teams are very similar, but Texas is just a slightly better version of Penn State. So I'm picking Texas to win the Natty.
Okay. I've got Penn State coming out of their side of the bracket, and then like with the Texas Oregon game, I think because of what Oregon might have seen out of Texas and the way they could be able to exploit like some of the Texas's weaknesses, I think Oregon might be able to just barely pull out a win against Texas, but I expect it to be back and forth. I think a game would be picked up. I think Oregon might be able to win it late, and then it'll be them in a rematch against Penn State. And I think Oregon, like, they've already beat Penn State once, and I think they'll beat them again. And they'll get that national championship.
All right. Well, we want to thank all y'all for joining us as we broke down the college football playoff here on this reaction show. Want to thank Cody for joining us, the Matt Campbell impersonator himself. Where can they find you at?
You can follow me on Twitter at fake Matt Campbell, this word fake, and then Matt with one T, Campbell on Twitter. That's where you can find me, or just search for Matt Campbell impersonator.
And of course, search for Cody's show, BleavInISU. I'm Matt Menson. You can find me at SFMattISU on Twitter. Give the Cornfield Sports Pod a like and a subscription. Find us on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, Apple Music, Amazon, Castbox, Good Pods. I don't know if anybody uses those last three, but they exist for some reason, so somebody must use them. But for the absence of Blake Peterson, I'm Matt Menson, and this has been the reaction show to the 2024 College Football Playoff Bracket on the Cornfield Sports Pod.